So Tuesday the 30th of June, and I've just completed my first month of this journey recording this vlog. So a little bit later today, depending on how things have panned out at the Empire Casino, I'll give a bit of feedback on my results over this month and some observations around those, and maybe some things I did well and maybe some things I didn't do so well. I've also found out that I might have actually sneaked in at about position 49 or 50 into the cash race final. This is a promotion that the Empire runs for the top 50 players who played the most hours, capped at 4 hours a day over the month, and then 10 high hand winners over the last 10 days of the month. So I've got to find out whether or not I'm in or out today, whether or not my 4 hours I'm going to do today will sneak me in, and then I might have to do a bit of negotiating to get a pass to play on Sunday in the actual final cash race. Then also I'm going to do just a little bit of feedback around some thoughts I've had on how to play thin value on the turn. We often focus on where we've got thick value and bluffs, but sometimes, you know, we do have thin value hands, and navigating our way through these spots, I've got some ideas around that which I'll share. Anyway, I'll catch you guys later. Thank you. Bye. First month of vlogging my journey has come to the end. So yeah, I was up today, but overall been slightly down for the month. I'll share those results when I get back. And I have qualified for the cash race. I think I've come 49th or 50th. So now I need to do that negotiation, see if I can get a pass to come up here on Sunday and play in the tournament. It is actually the 1st of July. The observant amongst you will notice the change in top. Didn't get around to doing what I wanted to do yesterday. But yeah, so first of all, I'm going to have a quick recap on my results for June and some thoughts around those. Actually, for June 26, I've ended up being slightly down, nearly £500 down over the course of the month. I've actually played some 21 sessions with about 77 hours of play in there, which roughly equates to nearly 2,000 hands. And I suppose interestingly, I've actually won more sessions. I've had nearly 60% winning sessions compared to 40% losing sessions. But overall, that's averaged out to a small loss for the month. How that looks like on the trend graph, which is here. So I didn't actually get off to a particularly good start. The first day I was down about £600. That's when I actually got into a very stupid spot, made a big mistake in a 4-bet pot where my aces got stacked by somebody's set of queens. And then I felt that over the course of the month in general, I played pretty well, pretty solidly. And then I started to have a good little run, lots of positives in the middle part of the month, and then dropped off a bit towards the end. And I think in general, what I felt is I've been playing pretty well. I've been very aware, I've been making sure I've been hitting the ground running, concentrating, applying strategy, trying to exploit players. I have actually had a few pretty poor run-outs when I've been ahead that have lost me some decent money. I also had one hand really go in my favour when I managed to get a set of, well, full house of kings on the river against somebody's aces. So that went in my favour. I think the areas that I really need to focus on is squeezing out that bit more value and making sure that when I do get to rivers, I don't oversize my value bets to make sure that I actually do get called, but also earlier in the pots, in earlier streets, maybe slightly increase my value bet sizes just to eke out a little bit more there. I've had some really good bluff opportunities that have come through, a few that haven't done so, but you don't need that many to actually be successful for your bluffing to be a positive aspect. So I'm pretty positive about how things have actually gone this this month. So looking forward to July. I'll just make a few observations on the Empire cash race as well. So basically, what they do is they take a pound out of pots. I think it's over £20. May not be completely accurate, and that goes into a prize pool. And what happens is that prize pool is accumulated over a month, such that the top 50 players who have played the most hours, capped at 4 hours a day, will actually get into the cash race final tournament. This is like a day tournament, and it's on the first Sunday of the month after the month where you're accumulating your hours. And in essence, you can then also get, an additional 10 players who come in who've got high hands of the day over the last 10 days. So the maximum you can have is 60 players. Often it's below that because of no shows and holidays or whatever it might be. And in summary, roughly what happens is the top, I think it's 15 or 16, get prize money. About 8 to 15 is around about, and again it depends on the total value of the pot available, but around about, say, £700. So if you looked at the earlier part of my post, if you're playing, say, I don't know, 70 hours or so, then roughly at £10 an hour, it's your rake back for the month if you finish in those between about 8 and 15. And then as you go up, the prize money increases quite significantly, so that by the time you actually win, it's generally around about £6,000. But also there's a pretty decent package for a Vegas event that they sponsor, look after you at the Empire. So it is definitely worth going for if you are a regular player and you want to commit to those sorts of hours at one casino. Generally, I haven't done that because I prefer to move around, but actually by default in June, because of the heat wave we had, I didn't fancy going on the tubes up to play at the Vic or other places, so I just did the easy journey into Charing Cross for me and went to the Empire. So I've sort of sneaked in over the line at 49th. I should just say that my 49th place to get me in was about 60 hours, and the player who's at number one has actually done about 100 hours over the course of the month. So that's pretty intensive going at that. So whatever the calculation is, 25 days, so 4 hours a day for that particular individual. So there's sorts of hours you need to put in order to get there. Obviously it varies month to month depending on holidays and all this sort of stuff, but that's a sort of order of magnitude of hours that you need to commit to get into the cash race. And now I'm going to do a little piece around how to maybe optimize thin value hands on turns and then rivers. So in this first example, I'm sitting on the button with Jack 10 of diamonds and it folds around to me, so I open up to 12 and I get called by Mr. Cod again in the big blind. And the flop comes down, what a surprise, it's our 10-5-2 flush draw, so a very wet dynamic board. And I have a thin value hand here, so I've got top pair, weak kicker. A thick value hand would be like a pair of kings or ace 10 here, where you'd be prepared to bet for, say, 3 streets of value. But if you get raised, you might have to consider potentially folding. Whereas actually with the thin value hand here, you could probably look to get 2 streets of value. And the biggest consideration is when you should try to get those 2 streets of value. So let me show you. Mr. Cod checks and I do my normal range C bet, £10 into 25, he calls. So his range probably comprises 10x, under pairs to the 10, a whole bunch of different draws, flush draws, straight draws, combo draws, gut shots, stuff like that, maybe some ace highs. And when the 8 of diamonds comes in, I still have a thin value hand here. Villain is still capped, so the turn hasn't changed the nuts. It's not a flushing card, it's not a pairing card, it's not a straightening card really. So I need to think about getting a second street of value here. I've got a thin value hand. When we talk about betting thinly for value, it doesn't necessarily mean small. It means betting your thin value hands. So what I'd be doing here is I would actually bet on this particular turn, and I'd be betting a size that basically I wouldn't be value owning myself by betting. What that means is if, say, villain had king 10 or ace 10, something like that, I wouldn't want to be betting a size that the only hands that would be calling me would be those sorts of hands. I want to try to keep in his weaker hands, his worst 10x, his pocket 9s, for example, pocket 7s, and all of the draws that he has, so that I'm ahead of the majority of his potential range. So when he checks to me, I want to bet a size, and I choose about 25 here in order to get the weaker part of Mr. Cod's range, so weaker 10x, 9s, 7s, say, all his draws to call me, bearing in mind that I might get called by a slightly stronger 10, but the majority of his range is what I'm trying to target here. So he calls. The river bricks out. Mr. Cod checks to me, and here I've already got my 2 streets of value. So if I bet now, what potentially am I going to get called by? Well, potentially all his better 10x, maybe some 2 pair that might have come in somehow, maybe a set of 7s. All his draws have bricked. So the only hands that are potentially going to be calling me are those which are probably going to be ahead. So I decide to check back. I've got my 2 streets of value, and he shows pair of 9s, so I've beaten his pair of 9s here. So that's 2 streets of value with a thin value hand on a wet die. And now I'll actually have a look at an example where the flop is dry and more static, but very similar, just to have a look at a different approach. And now, same sort of situation, but with a slightly different nuance to it. And it's all about board texture. So it folds around to us, we open up Jack 10 of diamonds, we get called. Mr. Cod's range is going to be very similar. On this particular flop, 10, 5, 2, now it's rainbow. His range is going to be 10x, it's going to be under pairs to the 10, it's going to be potentially some sort of straight draws and gut shots, but no flush draws. It's got no flush draws on there unless they're backdoor flush draws. So he checks, we range C bet, he calls, he hasn't raised his strong hands here, he doesn't have many draws to raise off, so his range is going to be predominantly around paired hands, maybe 2 pairs, maybe some trapping sets, that sort of thing. So when the brick 8 of diamonds comes in, completing a fully rainbow turn, and Mr. Cod checks to us, this is when, with a thin value, it is actually better in general to check back the turn. The reason being is it's actually quite difficult to get value from worse hands because there aren't the plethora of flush draws on this particular board, and it's easier to value own ourselves against the part of the range that would call a turn bet here. And so there's no real draws, there's no real driver here to actually bet. So when we check back, which we do, and the river then becomes the 7 of clubs, if Mr. Cod checks to us, we can then be pretty confident that he does not have a very strong 10 or 2 pair or a set of 7s or something like that. Okay, we may have given him a free card that might have brought in some loose draw, like, what's that, 4, 6 of maybe something, I don't know, hearts he might have had, but it's very, very rare, and he hasn't led into us. So therefore we can be ahead of the majority of his range, and we can actually bet for some significant value here. So again, I'm going 25 into the pot of 45, and he calls, and he's got a pair of 9s again, unsurprisingly. One of the reasons why he's going to call there as well is that he's not going to put us on a particularly strong hand. He might think that we're actually stabbing at this because we actually checked back on the turn, which is a sign of weakness, often it's perceived to be. So we can actually get calls here by weaker hands than we would potentially expect to. And the other thing is, if he actually, in this situation, leads into us, if he actually has a strong hand, like King 10 or a set of 7s, generally the tendency is to be quite greedy. And so the bet size used by Mr. Cod, if he leads into us on the river, might actually give us a clue in our bluff catching checklist as to whether or not to call down our weak top pair against a potential bluff that he may have, or stronger value hands where he might be actually betting larger in a group. So some insight there into a thought process, part of your repeatable thought process for ranging opponents, etc., and how to approach these thin value hands and how to try to get 2 streets of value out of them. The first example is on a fairly wet dynamic flop where we're looking to get that value on the turn before potential draws come in, flushes come in, etc., where villain would then become potentially more elastic to bet sizing on the river. So you might not actually get as much value if you are ahead. And the second example was on the dry static flop, where the approach taken was to actually check back on the turn and then try to get some value on the river, mainly because villain will not necessarily expect you to have such a strong hand as a thin value, top pair or hands like that, and will potentially call down with something worse. And also, if they actually have a strong hand themselves, the bet sizing that they use on the river may give you a clue to the value that they do have, or you can potentially go through your bluff catching checklist and try to call down the bluff. So hopefully that was of use. And the whole thing around the bet size is very different to when we've got, for example, bluffs and thick value plus on brick turns, for example, where you're looking to actually optimize your overbets. In these situations, what you're trying to do is you're trying to target parts of villain's range to keep in wider, weaker range for you to actually get the value out of that without value owning yourself. So I hope that was useful, and I will actually provide the link to the video, the post I did on how to play value plus and bluffs on brick turns here. Take care. Please like and subscribe.